Ladies and gentlemen, warriors of the night, I am here to wake up the lions, not the sheep. You didn't stumble into this hour by accident. The 3 a.m. hour is not a coincidence. It's a divine appointment. It's the time when heaven leans close, when hell panics, and when you are called to rise in your authority. So, buckle up. We are about to unlock 6 keys that will shake the foundations of your spiritual life. At 3 a.m., when the world is cloaked in darkness and silence, a different kind of activity surges in the spiritual realm. This is the hour when most people are lost in their dreams, unaware that heaven and hell are anything but quiet. There's a reason the 3 a.m. hour has been called the witching hour, the time when dark forces are most active. But what many fail to recognize is that this is also the hour of divine invitation. It is the moment when God calls his warriors to rise, to intercede, to interrupt, and to shift the atmosphere over their lives, their families, their cities. To understand this hour is to understand that spiritual authority is not about waiting passively, it's about taking your place on the front lines of battle. We have been taught to pray like beggars. We plead, we hope, we wish, often forgetting that we are sons and daughters of the King. When you rise at 3 a.m., you are not waking to mumble half-hearted prayers into the dark. You are stepping into your authority. You are stepping into it's the role of a kingdom enforcer. You don't pray like you're knocking on heaven's door from the outside. You pray like you are seated in heavenly places, operating with the authority Jesus gave you. At that hour, your words are not empty. Your decrees carry the weight of heaven. You release orders into the spirit realm, and hell takes notice. Demons don't flee because you sound religious. They flee because you understand your authority and you stand in it without compromise. But understand this: spiritual warfare at 3 a.m. is not a gentle exercise. This is not about polite prayers or whispered comfort. This is the time when you put on the full armor of God and you swing with precision. You don't slap at the air. You strike with targeted authority. You break generational curses. You shatter cycles of bondage. You intercede for loved ones trapped in darkness. You tear down demonic strongholds. You don't merely survive the battle, you advance the kingdom. The enemy knows that if he can keep the church sleeping at 3 a.m., he can operate unchecked. But when you rise, when you push through tiredness, when you lift your voice in the silence, you disrupt his operations, you disturb his plans, you bring chaos to his camp. And yet, breakthrough rarely comes wrapped in comfort. The power of 3 a.m. prayer is born out of inconvenience. When the flesh is weak, when the body craves rest, when everything in you says to roll over and sleep, that is when you press in. That is when you discover a power routine prayers in the daytime often fail to unlock. It's in that pressing, in that sacrifice, that heaven responds. Breakthrough is often hiding just behind the wall of your inconvenience, waiting for you to puss. It's not the one who shouts loudest on Sunday or posts the most on social media. It's the disciplined believer who wakes up, who shows up, who prays up, whether they feel like it or not. Hell doesn't fear your feelings. Hell fears your obedience. When you set that alarm, when you rise in the cold, when you kneel in the quiet, you make a declaration that resounds in the spirit realm. I am awake, I am aware, and I am armed. But remember this above all: you are not woken just to be awake. You are woken because you have an assignment. When God stirs you at 3 a.m., it's because something needs to shift. Someone needs intercession. Some atmosphere needs to be changed. Some attack needs to be intercepted. And when you answer that call, when you partner with heaven in that hour, you step into your true identity as a warrior, as a watchman, as one who understands that the night belongs not to the enemy, but to the sons and daughters of light. At 3 a.m., the world is wrapped in a deep stillness, and while most are tucked beneath their blankets, unaware of what's stirring beyond the physical realm, the spirit realm is fully alive. This hour has often been called the witching hour, the time when demonic activity is heightened, when curses are cast, when dark forces are working their schemes unnoticed. But what many believers overlook is that 3 a.m. is not just the devil's playground. It's heaven's battleground. God is searching for those willing to wake, to rise, to intercept and to disrupt the plans of darkness. When you wake up at this hour, it's not a random stirring or an accidental insomnia. It's a divine invitation. It's heaven whispering to you, come stand in the gap. Come shift the atmosphere. Come release my power on earth. Most people have been conditioned to approach prayer like beggars knocking on a closed door, hoping someone on the other side might listen. But when you rise at 3 a.m., you need to leave the beggar mindset at the bedside. You're not waking up to convince God to be good. You're waking up to align with His will, to step into the authority He's already given you. This is not the time for shallow surface prayer. This is the hour to pray like a son, like a daughter, like a warrior who knows they carry the weight of heaven behind their words. At 3 a.m., your decrees are not empty. They are declarations backed by heaven's armies. When you pray, you are not echoing wishes. You are releasing commands that reverberate through the spirit realm, tearing down strongholds, binding forces of darkness, and unlocking chains over people, families, cities, and nations. But let's be clear, spiritual warfare at 3 a.m. is not a casual activity. It's not a spiritual hobby or a mystical experiment. It's a battleground, and only the focused survive. This is not the hour for soft, padded prayers that make you feel good but do nothing in the heavenlies. This is the time for precise, targeted, militant intercession. You strike at the heart of addiction. You rebuke the spirit of depression. You silence the voices of suicide. You dismantle generational curses, and you break the cycles of poverty and sickness that have wrapped themselves around your bloodline. The enemy counts on the church being asleep, especially at this hour. But when you rise, when you say yes to the tug on your heart, when you refuse to let the devil have an unchallenged night, you turn the tide of battle. You disturb his operations. You bring light into the dark. You make it clear that the watchmen are still awake. Yet breakthrough in this hour doesn't come cheap. The power of 3 a.m. is found not in comfort, but in sacrifice. When the body is exhausted, when the bed feels warm, when every excuse to stay asleep feels justified, that's when the warriors separate themselves from the crowd. Breakthrough doesn't wait for a convenient moment. It waits for a committed heart. Those who dare to get up when it's inconvenient, who press in when it's painful, who persist when it's uncomfortable, discover the depths of God's power in ways others only dream about. Heaven moves not just because you pray, but because you persist, because you show up, because you refuse to quit when it's hard. Breakthrough is not reserved for the gifted or the famous. It's reserved for the persistent. More importantly, the 3 a.m. wake-up call isn't random. When God stirs you, is because there's an assignment waiting. Don't waste the hour scrolling your phone or tossing in frustration. Ask God, why am I awake? Who needs my intercession? Where should I direct my warfare? You're being recruited into a mission. Maybe someone across the world is on the edge of death and needs your prayer. Maybe someone you love is about to make a destructive decision. Maybe your city is under spiritual assault, and you are the one called to push back. Heaven does not wake you for entertainment, it wakes you for assignment. And when you step into that assignment, when you obey, even when it costs you sleep, you become a force that hell cannot ignore. You become the one who says, "Not on my watch." You stand as one who knows that the night does not belong to the enemy, it belongs to the sons and daughters of the Most High. At 3 a.m., when the night feels its heaviest and the silence wraps itself around the earth, most people are lost in their sleep, unaware of the profound activity taking place beyond what their eyes can see. This hour has long been associated with spiritual intensity. The so-called witching hour, a time when the forces of darkness often work undisturbed, casting their nets, weaving their plans, and releasing chaos into homes, cities, and nations. But this narrative is incomplete because the 3 a.m. hour is not only when the enemy moves, it's when God calls. It's when heaven taps the shoulders of those willing to hear, when God stirs the hearts of intercessors, warriors, and watchmen to rise from their beds and take their stand. To wake at 3 a.m. is not to simply endure restlessness. It is to answer a summons. It is to take your place in the spiritual battle raging over destinies, souls, and territory. But understand this clearly. The battle at 3 a.m. is not for the faint-hearted. Spiritual warfare in this hour is not a gentle exercise or a poetic metaphor. This is war in the truest sense. This is when you stand between life and death, blessing and curse, breakthrough and breakdown. You are not offering soft, vague prayers. You are engaging in precise, strategic warfare. You break addictions. You stand against generational bondage. You speak life over those bound by depression or despair. You intercede for cities under spiritual attack, for churches under siege, for families hanging by a thread. The enemy counts on the church being silent in this hour because silence gives him permission to roam. But when you rise, when you lift your voice, when you declare God's word into the darkness, you disrupt the enemy's plans, you throw his camp into confusion, and you remind him that he is not in control. 3 a.m. the earth lies in a deep hush, wrapped in shadows and silence, but the spirit realm is wide awake. This is the hour when battles rage in unseen realms, when dark forces operate boldly under the cover of night, and when curses, confusion, and destruction are often set in motion. Yet, even more powerful is what many believers fail to grasp, that 3 a.m. is not only the hour when the enemy is active, but when heaven is calling. This is the hour when God stirs his watchmen, intercessors, and warriors to rise, to step into the gap, to interrupt the schemes of hell, and to release the light of God's presence into the darkness. Being stirred awake at this hour is not an accident. It is not meaningless restlessness. It is an invitation into divine partnership, an opportunity to shift atmospheres, and to become an active agent in the unfolding of heaven's purposes. Too often, people approach prayer with the mindset of beggars, as if they are trying to convince a distant God to act or to care. But when you rise at 3 a.m., you are not meant to stand on the outside knocking. Yet stepping into this kind of spiritual warfare is no casual affair. It is not a game or a mystical experiment. It is real, raw battle. At 3 a.m., you don't come with vague, wandering prayers. You come with sharp, targeted intercession. You break the power of addiction over loved ones. You cancel assignments of suicide and depression. You speak life over situations that seem dead. You wage war over your family, your church, your community, even your nation. This is the time to dismantle strongholds that have stood for generations, to break the cycles of poverty, violence, and sickness that have claimed territory in your bloodline or city. And make no mistake, the enemy banks on you being asleep, on the church being passive. But when you rise, when you take your position, when you speak God's word with faith and authority, you disrupt his plans. You confuse his ranks, and you push back the advancing tide of darkness. At 3 a.m., the world lies still, cloaked in darkness and silence, but the heavens are not asleep. In the unseen realm, this hour is often marked by intense spiritual activity, a time when dark forces attempt to establish their influence, but also a time when God calls his people to rise and stand as spiritual gatekeepers. This is not an accidental waking or random stirring from sleep. It is often heaven's summons, a call to step into alignment with divine purposes and to intercept the enemy's plans. While most are resting in the natural, the wise and discerning know that this hour is an opportunity to engage with God and shift circumstances through prayer. The stillness of the night amplifies the voice of intercession, making it a powerful time to listen, to decree, and to release God's will on earth. Too many believers underestimate the authority they carry. We often pray like beggars at the gate, asking God to move as though we must convince him to act. But when you rise at 3 a.m., you do not come as a desperate outsider. You come as a son, as a daughter, as one seated with Christ in heavenly places. This is not the time for timid prayers. This is the time for authoritative declaration. You don't rise to wish or to hope. You rise to command the morning, to declare God's promises, to bind what needs to be bound and to loose what needs to be loosed. At 3 a.m., your words are not just sounds, they are weapons. When you pray with authority, the kingdom of darkness trembles not because of your volume or eloquence, but because you know who you are and what you carry. You come, backed by heaven, and hell knows it. This hour is a battleground, not a playground. Spiritual warfare at 3 a.m. is not about religious ritual or routine. It is about precise, focused engagement. You are not merely reciting words into the air. You are breaking chains, overthrowing demonic assignments, canceling the plans of the enemy, and releasing God's breakthrough. At this hour, you pray for deliverance over loved ones bound in addiction, depression, or rebellion. You tear down generational strongholds, call forth provision where there's lack, and declare healing where sickness has ruled. The devil hopes you will stay asleep, passive and unaware, but when you rise and take your position, you challenge his operations and push back his advances. You are not a spectator in the battle. You are a soldier on the front lines, and your prayers matter more than you know. Yet, none of this comes without sacrifice. The 3 a.m. hour tests your discipline, your hunger, and your willingness to lay down personal comfort. This is not the time of day when emotion will carry you. It is the time when only discipline and obedience will keep you standing. Anyone can pray when they feel stirred or inspired, but few will rise when the cost is sleep, convenience, and comfort. And yet, it is often in this sacrifice that the greatest power is released. God honors those who choose to prioritize his call over their own comfort. When you rise at this inconvenient hour, you demonstrate to heaven and hell alike that you are serious about your assignment. You step into the shoes of a true watchman, one who refuses to let the night pass without standing guard, one who says, "Not on my watch."